So the birth of the PC as we know it today is the 8086 and the 8088 computers were the early on. Then we had the 286, the 386, and the 486. Today we're pretty much using the 686 and 786 computers. That's where we're at today. The Pentium Series I runs at 60, or Series 1 runs at 60 megahertz up to 200 megahertz. It offers superscalar technology and onboard cache. We had the Pentium Pro, the Pentium MMX, and the Pentium 2. We had the Celeron, which the Celeron was a series that had the Mathco burnt out of it. It was just for marketing. It was basically the same chip, but the Mathco processor was burnt out of it. Had some other little speed limiting things which made it burn less power. So they put them in laptops mostly, but sometimes you could buy the chip in a personal computer that was a Celeron if you were going to use it like you would a laptop. It wasn't near as fast as the full Pentium. We had the Xeon, which was scaled up for like handling, so that one went in servers. It handled multiple connections. It scaled very well. It just didn't get as much throughput in each particular chain that you were using. And then we had the Pentium 3, which is a big box processor. It was a really good one when it came out. Possible upgrade scenarios, we had the 86 to 88. You had the 286 to the 486. You had the 386 SX series, Pentium 1, 2, and 3. So these were all upgradable to some point, up to some speed, up to some memory size, up to some memory speed, this kind of thing. Inserting a CPU, we had a low insertion force socket, a zero insertion force socket, and a single edge connector, an SEC, single edge connector slot, type 1. So the low insertion force just means you need a little bit of force to push it in and lock it in. So they had like a V slot, and it would squeeze together like this, and when you push that in there, it would lock into place. And then the zero insertion force, you just dropped it on there and pulled an arm down and locked it in place. So the thing just sat there, and when you dropped it in place, they had a little metal frame that went over, and you locked it into place. It just put a little bit of force for the ball gated arrays. So it had a bunch of balls in the bottom, and they just touched the socket that way. So that's kind of how they went. And then the other ones had pins, and the pins were always bending if you put it in wrong and that kind of thing. We'll see some pictures of those in a minute. So for the chapter summary, we have understanding processor development and progress is essential. These things change incredibly fast. It's kind of slowed down a little bit today, so you're getting bigger leaps as things happen. They're not changing them as often. So previously they were changing every few months. So every few months you could potentially need to change out your computer. The three key elements for measuring a CPU's performance are its speed, address bus, and external data bus. So the three key elements for measuring a CPU's performance are its speed, address bus, and external data bus. So the address bus and the data bus and its CPU performance. So speed of the CPU, its address bus lines, and its external data bus lines. So several key CPU developments have occurred since the 8286. You betcha they have. And then today's standard processor is the Pentium 3 chip. So just remember for the test, today's standard processor is the Pentium 3 chip. And replacing, but in real life we're using 686s and 786s, right? So replacing a CPU is usually simple. You must watch for electrostatic discharge and pin damage when handling a CPU. That was true back in the day. We had to ground ourselves. Today's chips are protected against electrostatic discharge. It's still a good idea to do it just to protect yourself from getting a shock, but it's pretty hard to damage the components of today. And the PC world, for damaging a device is pretty difficult to do. But when you discharge, when you have an electrostatic discharge, that can contain, 100,000 volts, some of those. They can contain a lot of voltage, and it doesn't take much current. So you have a lot of voltage, but a little bit of electricity runs through there. What kills you when you get electrocuted is the current, not the voltage. 120 volts is much more likely to kill you than a 220 volt. The 220 volt will usually knock your hand off of it. It's a lot of voltage. But a 120 volt is enough for you to hang on to it, and then the current runs through your body and it will fry you. That's what kills you. More deaths come from 120 volts than they do from 220. Although 220, the current will kill you much faster if you're locked onto it in some way, like if it falls on your arm or something like that, where you can't be knocked away from it. What else can we say about that? Electrostatic discharge. So there's very little current. It won't kill you, but in some cases, if you get enough of a jolt of voltage, it can stop your heart. So you might, if you see someone get knocked down and they're not breathing, just try to do the CPR to get their heart going again. And you can also use the defibrillators, the external defibrillators, so just to jumpstart their heart, right? So if you get their heart going again, they'll usually survive. And then with respect to the chips, you know, they're taking an incredible volt of joltage, and it can just rip through the PMP layers of silicone in there, and they short circuit, and that's why they get broken. But today's chips, they're shielded against it. So they're not as susceptible to it as the older processors and things like that are. So if you're working on some really old gear, it may be critically important that you ground yourself. For the new, more modern gear, it's not as critical.